Welcome. There's a fundamental shift happening in Canadian boardrooms right now. It's called economic reconciliation. And what's interesting is how it's quickly moving from a peripheral concern to a core, non-negotiable part of corporate strategy. So let's break down the executive framework you really need to understand to navigate this new landscape.
Let's start with a number that frames this entire conversation: $27.7 billion. Now, what is that? Well, that's the estimated annual boost to Canada's GDP if the socioeconomic gap with Indigenous peoples were closed. So you see, this isn't about cost. It's about a massive, unrealized economic opportunity for the entire country. And this quote from RBC thought leadership, it just nails the shift in perspective that's required. The conversation is moving well beyond social obligation and landing squarely in the boardroom. We're talking about a fundamental reframing of Indigenous partnership as an economic necessity for growth, for stability, and frankly, for your competitive advantage. Okay, so to navigate this, we're going to follow a clear 5-part agenda. We'll start with the economic why, then we'll break down the official mandate, look at how to actually architect a plan, tackle key targets, and finally, we'll get into the crucial concept of data sovereignty. Right, let's dive into the core financial case. The numbers really do demonstrate a compelling return on investment, and on the flip side, significant risk for those who fail to adapt. So get this. Over the next decade, there's a projected $98 billion equity opportunity for Indigenous partners. This is mostly concentrated in major resource and energy projects where, let's be honest, authentic partnership is now absolutely essential for a project to even get off the ground. This slide really illustrates that crucial paradigm shift. You see, financial institutions are rapidly moving away from treating reconciliation as some kind of discretionary corporate social responsibility activity. Instead, it's being integrated as a core business imperative, and it's being managed with the exact same strategic rigor you'd apply to climate risk or market expansion. So what's the official architecture for this corporate action? Well, it all starts with the foundational document, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 92. This is your institutional mandate. Call to Action 92 is a direct call for the corporate sector to adopt the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a practical working framework, applying its principles directly to your corporate policy and your core operations. And Call to Action 92 breaks down into 3 really actionable pillars for business leaders. First, meaningful consultation and obtaining free, prior, and informed consent. Second, ensuring equitable access to jobs and economic opportunities. And third, providing education for all of your staff, from the C-suite down, to build genuine intercultural competency. Okay, so once you understand the mandate, the next logical step is building the internal structure to actually deliver on it. And this is where a formal reconciliation action plan, or a RAP, becomes absolutely essential. You see, effective implementation needs a robust, top-down governance structure, just like you'd have for climate risk. That means direct board oversight, senior management committees with crystal clear mandates, and dedicated teams to manage execution. And, this is critical, this structure has to include external Indigenous advisors to be legitimate. And that brings us to what is really a non-negotiable principle. This plan cannot be developed in a boardroom silo. A reconciliation action plan is only legitimate and, frankly, only effective if it is authentically co-developed with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit partners right from the very beginning. All right, let's look at one of the most tangible and measurable metrics within a RAP: procurement from Indigenous-owned businesses. Now, the federal government has set a target for at least 5% of its procurement to come from Indigenous-owned businesses, which reflects the Indigenous share of the Canadian population. And this is now seen as the baseline for the corporate sector as well. Think of it as a floor, not a ceiling, a starting point from which to grow. Hitting that 5% target, well, it requires a multifaceted strategy. It means overhauling your existing procurement policies. It means actively supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs with innovative financing and payment terms. You have to leverage joint ventures and use a common registry of certified Indigenous businesses. And above all, it requires accountability across all levels of your organization. Finally, let's tackle a critical and, let's face it, often misunderstood component of any modern partnership: the sovereignty of data. The core principle here is actually straightforward and incredibly powerful. You simply cannot have self-determination in the 21st century without data sovereignty.
This is the inherent right of Indigenous peoples to govern all information about their communities, their lands, and their resources, and it's grounded in international law.
So to understand this in practice, you need to know the OCAP framework. O stands for ownership. This principle establishes that First Nations communities collectively own their cultural knowledge and their data. That ownership is permanent. It doesn't change hands just because a company happens to collect the data.
Next up is C for control. This means First Nations have the right to control all aspects of their data. They decide how it's collected, how it's stored, and ultimately, they decide how it's going to be used.
A stands for access. This is an absolute right for communities to access any and all data about them at any time, regardless of where that information is physically or digitally stored. It's their data.
And finally, we have P for possession. This is what makes ownership tangible. It is the right to physically and legally hold, manage, and steward their own data. It ensures that control isn't just a theoretical idea, but a practical reality.
And that brings us right back to the economic imperative. This entire framework, from Call to Action 92 all the way to the principles of OCAP, is so much more than a path to reconciliation. For corporate leaders, it's a strategic roadmap to mitigating risk, unlocking value, and building shared prosperity. So really, the question is no longer if your company will engage, but how quickly you can adapt.